Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel Nest Artfully. Here I talk about everything that goes into making a house your home. Today's video is super special because I'm finally going to be trying something that I've long wanted to do. I'm going to be working with air dry clay. Now there's another YouTube creator who's inspired me to get started with this medium, and I will provide the link into her videos in my description box. You can check them out. So I'm going to get started with trying to make some coasters just to get comfortable with the medium, and then I'll be progressing into making my own eco-friendly Ganesha idol for the upcoming Vinayaka Chaturthi festival. So I'm really crossing my fingers this turns out good. Let's get into it. For this project, I'll be using some air dry clay. Now I have the Jovi brand of air dry clay here, which I got online, but any air dry clay will work just as fine. I've got some paint brushes. I've got a little bit of dry flowers to add detailing via impression on the coasters. I've got a tray for coaster making, which is actually for resin coasters, but I'm going to be using it for this project. I've got some water and a rolling pin. A pro tip that I've seen on YouTube is that it's good to use baking paper as a base while working with air dry clay, as it provides a non-stick environment and also protects whatever surface you're working on. The reason I'm going to be working with this coaster tray is, of course, one, for the shape itself, and two, to get the right amount of thickness, because often when getting started with air dry clay, we either tend to make the objects too thin or too thick. So I think this is going to give me just the right amount of thickness. There's a tip that I read online about how, while you do something like this with air dry clay in a silicone mold, you can just pop the silicone mold into the freezer and let it set for about 10 minutes, which will help you pop these products out of the tray without damaging the shape, and then let it dry naturally before finishing off with the paint. So these two coasters were very easy to pop out of the silicone tray because I kept them in the freezer and then I just let them dry out naturally. I'm going to be trying some food coloring instead of the regular paint. So I had painted these two coasters after the clay had dried. I've learned that if I'm using any sort of a natural dye, it tends to fade a lot more than while painting. Once it's dry, you can see that it has faded quite a bit. So in this one, I used turmeric powder as the background color. So it's really faded and given a very, very faint watercolor sort of effect. Same thing with the leaf, but I also learned that, it might get a better effect to use foliage one that can imprint better. This leaf did not leave a very strong imprint, and so it's very superficial. And of course, to use other types of paint like acrylic and then see how it works. So I'll try that in a separate project, but for now this is what I have. So now that I've completed making the coasters, I feel a little more comfortable with the medium, and I'm going to try my hand at making my eco-friendly Ganesha idol. So I have a Ganesha idol at home and I'm going to use that as a reference point for this. Let's get started. Right at the onset of this, I'd like to mention that this is not an instructional video because this is my very first time trying to make a Ganesha idol like this. Now, as you can see, I just cut out the base from a chunk of air dry clay that I'd rolled out. Now I used another object that I had just to get the perfect circular shape to cut this out, and of course I smoothened the edges with water. Now this is not a very thick base because I'm going to have another base on top of it in the shape of a cylinder. Now that's going to be a thicker base, and that's what Lord Ganesha is going to be sitting on, and this is actually mimicking a lotus flower. So I have these petals that I'm actually cutting out on the surface and then putting it up on the sculpture. So now this is something I find easy to do. I find it easier to work with shapes on a flat surface and then transfer it onto the main sculpture that I'm working rather than carving it in place. For the legs, of course, I noticed that the seating position is some sort of a triangle. So I'm going with just rolling out some cylindrical bits of clay and bending it in the position that I want, and then just tweaking little bits for the feet, and then just making sure that the knees look little chunky enough and broad enough, and I'm just placing it, and with the help of water and a brush I'm just merging everything into place. For the stomach, I'm just rolling a ball of clay, and then again I'm just merging it into place. I'm working on the torso part separately, for which again I take another piece of air dry clay and merge it onto the ball that I've now just created as the tummy section. So now that I have the torso part mostly ready and the legs are done, I'm just going to add the hands, and for the hands again I'm just rolling out air dry clay in a cylindrical sort of shape, and then tweaking the edges to form the hands, and then just keeping it close to the body. Ganesha is one idol that has several creative representations, from him sitting and working on a laptop to him playing a guitar to just about everything. So there are different positions you could be working with. So I'm just working with the hands close to the body, and I'm only going with a very simple sort of detailing here. Now for the face, again I worked with a little ball of air dry clay and then just shaped it to have a little more triangular sort of structure towards the front from where the trunk is to come down. For the clothes, I've just cut slices of air dry clay, and I've kept the top part narrow and the bottom part wider to mimic, like, you know, the folds of some sort of silk or cloth just falling over. So I've tried to do that, and I've just placed that both on the pants as well as around his shoulders as a sort of shawl. And then the ears I separately worked on, once again like the petals of the flower. I cut it out on a flat surface and then just brought it and merged it in with the head. Then I got working on the crown, and again the crown I worked in layers. Eventually when I merged it, I felt that the layers weren't so clearly visible as I imagined they would be, but that's okay, it's still looking fine. So that is something you can keep in mind. Depending on the amount of merging you do, you might lose the details that you had when you were first working on it on a flat surface. Now I've added the tusks and I've added certain other decorative elements. I'm still working on the eyes. So now I still have a couple of rounds of detailing to do. So one of them is that I'm going to be adding another layer of petals, which will be between the two layers of petals right now. And then I have to add his jewelry and some more additional details. And then lastly, I'll be doing the painting. The air dry clay has some moisture in it and can be used as is without really adding water. And if you're adding water to make it retain a certain shape you want, or of course stick to another part, then just use it with a brush. Do not mix too much water or try to fold in the water, because that gets very messy and you find it harder to then mold the shapes that you require. In terms of the medium itself, I think air dry clay is a wonderful medium because it's helping an absolute novice like me do something like this. Another thing that I feel is really helpful is to have a reference image, or if you even have a sculpture at home, then it's great to look at it so that you kind of understand the anatomy and the position better. Since I'm no expert at this, there were a few mistakes that I made. I felt that adding accessories in terms of the clothing and in terms of other aspects separately helped me cover up those issues. The only aspect of this Ganesha idol that I painted with anything other than food colors is the lotus. I've noticed that when it comes to food coloring, the powder format, which I can mix and use, works far better on this air dry clay than the liquid colors, because the liquid colors tends to be more dilute and it fades a lot once dry, whereas the powder colors tend to stay vibrant. I hope you found this video inspiring to get started on your own DIY eco-friendly Ganesha idol. A project like this as a first-timer felt overwhelming as an idea, but once I got started, it felt natural and absolutely worth the effort. Also, it is not about perfect results but about finding a meditative space and creating something with love. This was both a labor of love and a meditative experience for me. To all those who will be celebrating the festival, we wish you a very happy Ganesh Chaturthi. And as always, thank you for watching and have a great day.